everyone. Welcome to the Black Podcast. We are here in the building like every Thursday at 4 p.m. Central Time. We're just excited about how the Black Podcast is continuing to grow and the amount of people that have supported us, but then the rich relationships that we have built with our guests since we started back in, I believe, August, Brian? So we've been rocking and rolling ever since then. And so we appreciate your support. I'm one of your hosts, Dr. Sherelle Hobson, and many of you know that I'm, very big on athletics and been a coach for a very long time, been in education for 16 years. But my passion has always been with our young Black males and what they do and how they, the gap between our young men and the educational system. And are we doing the things that we need to do to prepare them within athletics? So I am an athletic program enthusiast, and I help coaches. I coach coaches to increase their matriculation within their athletic program, because sports obviously is bigger than just going out there and playing basketball or football or whatever. But we need to make sure that they have the skills and the tools that they need to be productive within the community or just have a productive life, whatever that may entail, whether it's going to college or going to trade school or becoming an entrepreneur. There's still so many skills that we can learn within athletics that will help prepare them for a lifelong of success. And not only that, we like to prepare and educate, a lot of people, our influencers, who are our teachers, our faculty members, our staff members within universities, on what these young men need in order to be productive. And it's so important that we stress that and that people like Brian and I are speaking out on that, because for one, a lot of times our community lacks that knowledge and understanding of what is really going on within school. So we like to bring awareness to that. I've had a pleasure of writing 2 books, Seams of Gold and Discovering Beauty and Brokenness, because I believe it's important that we create a space that we can acknowledge where we really are. I know a lot of times in our Black community, we are so used to being busy that we think that we're okay. But those books really help us to identify the space that we're in so that we can be productive, so we can live the resilient life that we want to live. And so we just appreciate the amount of support that you guys have given to us, because through the support that you've given us, we're able to continue to support our young men and help them to identify who they are in the space that they're in. And that way, no matter where they go, they can operate and be productive. So our focus is on the Black community.
Pardon this interruption.
Go ahead, Brian.
Education. So yes, I'm thankful to be here as always, because we always have great conversation on these Thursdays. There's always someone that has so much experience in the space that they occupy, and they're able to bring that experience, share it with us, share it for you all who are listening, and you can take some of the principles, take some of the inspiration, and go forward to help change lives around you. When I was living in Miami I'm getting old. When I was living in Miami about 2014 or so, I was working for a child placement agency where we had lots of foster parents, or I trained foster parents, and we had all these foster children that were in the system. And I started to see the teenagers that nobody wanted to bring into their homes started to age out of the system and not really having the necessary skills to transition into adulthood. And when I asked why this issue was so prevalent, because you would see kids that just aged out and now they're in jail, kids that just aged out and now we're getting a phone call, such and such was just shot and we don't know if he's going to make it. Or we're getting a phone call, this young lady was in your care 6 months ago. Now she's got a child that is coming into the system. So things were not in place to really help with that transition. And I wanted to be a difference maker in that space. So I left Miami. And I came back to Mississippi, worked on my master's degree, developed a social business, a nonprofit organization, built my first mentoring program, started speaking all around the nation, the southeastern part of the nation, at least, at colleges, universities, high schools, to really bring about a voice and help elevate some of the voices of those who were not being listened to, as it pertains to the things that the minority, specifically the racial minority communities, really don't get access to, because the systems that we're operating under weren't necessarily designed for us. So I've just had so much focus of work in that space, and I can sit here and talk about what I'm passionate about all day long. But I wanted to open up the mic to our guest today. When I started going through her content and looking at the smiles that she had on these young people's faces, looking at the things that she was doing to be able to position them to have such a more successful life, like, man, when is Thursday going to get here? When is Thursday going to get here? So
it didn't come fast enough.
It did not. But without further ado, we have Miss Pranoo. How are you?
Yay, we got some women in there. Welcome.
Hi.
Thank you for accepting the invite. We are so blessed to have you here. And we just can't wait to learn so much more about you. We want to make sure that we maximize all the time that we have with you. Okay, so we're going to make sure we dive right in. And what we like to do is always start off with your background. You know, who are you, where you're from, and give us some insight on like the demographics and the dynamics of your family, how you were raised. And so that way we'll build on from there.
Yeah. So thank you both so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm so grateful to hear about all of the incredible work that you both are doing as well. My name is Pranoo Kumar, and I am the proud daughter of Konkani Indian immigrants. My mother and father, Pratima and Pramod Kumar, aka Mama and Papa Kumar to everyone. I was born in India and ended up moving to the United States when I was about 2 years old, to the Deep South, to Dallas, Texas. Lived in Austin for a little bit and then Jacksonville. A little bit about my background. My family, when you think about Indian families, there tends to be a very monolithic experience of they move here, they're doctors, they're the lawyers, they're engineers, they're all of these things. My parents were none of those things, but incredibly hard workers nonetheless. And when I was living in India for the first 2 years, it was my mother and I. My father had come to the United States to pursue what he thought would be the quote unquote American dream. But as some of us know, the American dream is not actually the American dream made for everyone. It is very selective and is very specific to a certain population. And for me, seeing my dad come to the US and truly work as hard as he could, knowing that he came from a space in India where he was in the top of his class, he was working incredibly hard, he was in the top of his field in engineering, and then coming to the US and essentially having to start all over. And I've only sort of learned that as I've gotten older, right? Like when you're younger, you don't really have that space of cultivating curiosity and understanding really what your family was doing for you to make sure that you are where you are today, at least for me. And so, yeah, so I lived in India with my mom. It was just me and her. And every time I think about that, being in India alone, as now a new mom, I have so much more gratitude. And I always think, oh man, I was a brat when I was little. Man, I could have been so much better to my mommy. But yeah, so kind of going all over the place. But so we lived there. We moved to the US when my dad had sort of completed his educational experience. And we lived in Dallas, Texas. And while we were there, experienced a tremendous amount of racism and oppression, not only just like within the city, but also within the school system. And that's sort of like where the roots are of why I'm in education. However, I didn't really understand my philosophy and my identity in education until I was older. I didn't really see a lot of what was happening. I was just experiencing it. And so when you don't know any better, when you're not seeing yourself in all of these spaces, you kind of think the way that you're treated is normal.
Normal.
Yeah, it's just part of everyday life. And so my parents were kept out of many conversations in school, were sort of stereotyped as the immigrants who could not speak English, the ones who couldn't understand what was going on, the ones who really didn't deserve to have a voice in the space. And so that sort of is also another reason why I'm so passionate about community-driven educational experiences. But yeah, that really was sort of my upbringing. And I think one of the things why I'm so passionate about identity-driven learning is because my family tried so hard when we moved to the US to really ensure that I felt safe in the space I was in. And so was really trying to ensure I was assimilating into the spaces. So instead of highlighting and showcasing my Indian culture, they, instead said, okay, this is how we need to dress. This is how we need to look. This is how we need to act. And still it did no one any good. And I talk about that with my parents now, but they didn't know. They were just trying to provide the best life and opportunity for me. So that was sort of my upbringing, and just trying to figure out how to conform to other spaces, even as young as 5 years old. I remember telling people my name was Jessica, and very transparently, because anytime a teacher said my name, it was, oh, what's a shorter name I can say for it? Or I can't say that name. Or they would just continue to say my name wrong. And when someone says that, they don't have to outwardly say, I don't like your name, I don't want to say your name. They can show other forms of language to show that they just don't find value in your name, which is so powerful. Sorry if I'm rambling.
You're good. You're good. Okay. You're good. Yeah.
It's getting deep in my.
I know. Get it. It's
way
good.
Back in there. But yeah, so I just found myself trying to ensure that I was adapting to whatever space I was in, instead of feeling honored in my uniqueness and my identity. And I didn't have any teachers, maybe one teacher, that really honored and uplifted my culture and my background. But even then it was, can you present a poster on Mahatma Gandhi? Or can you talk to us about the poverty in India? And it was, there's so much more to India and my family than these two things, So lived in Dallas, then moved to Austin, had very similar experiences, moved to Jacksonville, and for the first time was starting to kind of feel a little more acclimated in my community as I was getting older. But I think it wasn't until, even in college, I was finding myself just trying to figure out, who am I? What is it that I'm passionate about? What is it about my identity that brings me joy? And it was so hard finding that. I think the only time where I really found that was when I lived in New York and then started teaching. I think teaching, honestly, it saved my life, because I went through some really hard mental health experiences in college and grad school. In full transparency, tried to commit suicide in grad school. And I talked to my friend about this a lot, and we talk about how racism truly does cause murder. It is, whether it is with a gun or with your words, whether it is, especially when it comes to mental health, those experiences can just add on more and more and more to the point of no return. So when I moved to New York, and I think my babies, my students, the families that I've had the honor of like developing relationships with have truly saved my life, and also been the ones to inspire me to fully engage and honor my own identity. And I think in a way that has become like a freeing opportunity for my parents, because in the past few years, my parents have come forward with like a lot of their own experiences in the United States, even to this day. And now my mom will call me if she experiences something. And that's something that would have never happened even 5 years ago. So yeah, that's kind of like full circle of my background and my family.
You know, when you talk about, you know, when I started, I've been in education for 16 years. And I understand, you know, when you get into education, you think, you know, you're in this space now, you get to, you know, impact and these students, and oh my God, I get to tell them about life. Because I know that when we were in school, teachers had really, you know, they could have relevant relationships, like, you know, relationships with you and conversations about life, about choices, about, you know, and we've become so sensitive now that it's like people want you to stay away from any of those, like, we don't talk about that, we don't talk about that, right? So I can start feeling like I was started suffocating in my own life, you know, because I knew the truth. And I knew that what I was teaching or saying wasn't always the truth. You know, we talk about equal opportunities for everyone, and everyone, you know, if you have an education, you'll have all these great things and great jobs. And it's like, I have a doctorate and I still can't get another job, you know? So it's like, it's hard when you're in that space and you know that you have a system. I remember a past guest that we had, and I said, you know, how do you continue to educate in a system that is broken? And he said, it's not broken. And I said, I mean, me and Brian was looking at each other like, you know, he looks like us. And we're like, what are you talking about? It's not broken. And he said, no, the system is doing exactly what they wanted to do.
Yes.
And I was just like, this what is, you know, you're right. And so now I see why when I had certain conversations, it was like, oh, stay away from that conversation. It's like, you know, so I want you to talk more about when you really started to, you know, sometimes we have to, and I know for myself, I had to get into a really dark space in my life for me to really discover who I was. And, you know, I've always been an athlete. So sports has always been my identity. So I never really had to really deal with myself, you know? So it was, that's Sherelle. She's fast. That girl can move. She can this, she can that, you know? And so I just always, my life has always been attached to that. So when I got into my adult life and there was no more track, I was like, you know, gosh, just some things about me that either I don't like or I do like, but I hide it. Or so when you were starting to transition into really understanding who you are, can you elaborate more on that experience for you when you talk about like just how you were feeling in grad school and then how you made that transition into teaching? Like, what was that space like for you?
And before you answer that, I want to say thank you for your vulnerability, because you are like indirectly allowing other people to be vulnerable. And when you allow that vulnerability, that's when you can allow growth. So keep that in mind with your answers. Like, this is a full out, let it out, because that's how we change lives.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I feel very comfortable in this space, and I'm grateful because y'all have created that. So a couple of different things that happened. So when I was in grad school, for medical sciences, and started medical school. And within the first few months, I remember thinking, I want to work with children. I have a passion for this space, but I'm doing something that is not in the pursuit of what I want to do. I feel like I'm trying to live up to the assimilating part of my family. You know, we came to the US, you're going to be a doctor. You better figure this out, whatever way it's going to be. And it was a really dark time for me because I remember I was in Dominica, and I was at that time we were Skyping with my parents. I'd just gotten my white coat. We were getting ready. Parents were so excited, and I just told them, I don't want to do this. And it was incredibly hard. I'm very close to my parents, and they were heartbroken, and I can't fault them for that, because one, it was, oh my gosh, where do we go from here? How do we take care of you? You know, is that piece. It was, what will the family say? What will your relatives say? Because everyone else is in some type of field. What will society think of you because you decided to leave something that you put so much money into, which I'm still paying back now, which that's a whole nother problem. But, you know, so I moved back home, and I was 26 years old. When I went back home, I felt completely lost. And that was also when my mental health just started to take a really hard, just a tough toll on me, because I had spent 4 years studying biology, 2 years medical sciences with like a focus on adolescent health, and then medical school for almost a year. And then now I wanted to completely pivot and did not know where to go from there. And so so I started working in the nonprofit space, and it was during the recession. And so immediately got laid off probably within a year, and thought, okay, I'm going to move to New York. Another thing that my parents were like, wait, you don't have a job, you don't have money, you have loans, and you want to move to the most expensive city in the country? What are you doing? And so moved there, and I will say that changed everything. I was working 4 part-time jobs, literally sent my resume out to over 250 places, and was working at a card shop, Papyrus, and I was working at a retail store. I was working for free. I was an intern at Alicia Keys' Keep a Child Alive Foundation. I was working as a part-time like art teacher for really little ones, I think 18 to 24 months, and was literally just doing everything and anything I could. If there was a volunteer handout on a board in a coffee shop, I was trying to meet someone and talk to someone. And I think those experiences far outweighed my educational experience, because it was through those experiences that I also learned a lot of just humility, flexibility, building relationships, understanding what's important and what's meaningful in life, also discovering what my passion was. But in the thick of it, I was thinking, what am I worth? How do I get into education? When even then, education, especially in New York and some of these bigger cities where 90 to 95% of the teachers are white females, and somehow know someone within the school network to get in. And here I am, let me teach biology to little ones, and I couldn't even get in through that first gate. And so I think that was like a really dark time where I was just trying to figure out, okay, if this is meant for me, then it will somehow happen. And it ended up happening. But that was just sort of the entrance into education, to your point of saying, you go into education thinking you want to work with children and you want to jump in. And make an impact. But as you start to get deeper and deeper into the years of education, it wasn't until probably year 7 where I was thinking, oh, I'm starting to understand what specific intentional piece of education do I feel passionate about. And that's really the DEIA space, the decolonization space, the identity-driven space. And it took me a while to figure that out. Yeah, that's just sort of a glimpse of how it got into there.
I think, just looking all the way back to the transitions that you had to navigate through once you came to the States, all of that plays in. A lot of people don't understand the psychology behind the developmental stage of life. Whereas in those first 7 years or so, the things that you're absorbing from how people are treating you, even if they're not directly saying it, how the indirect, the subtle messages that they send, how you internalize those, and they end up manifesting later on in life. So just thinking about you changing yourself, calling yourself Jessica to try and fit in. Like, you look at the fact of, the study that they did, certain resumes that had certain names on them got the call back like this. And if it had a different name, So it's like our society, the Western society, tells you that you need to look like this, you need to sound like this, you need to present like this if you want to live that American dream. And when we're told that we have to change, that our name is weird, that whatever, it gives us that inferiority complex. And then as we get older in life, and we go from, okay, I'm in high school, I'm doing kind of well, I feel a little bit more proud of myself. Then we transition to college, and we're kind of like at the bottom again. Like, I have to know myself again, and like figure out myself again. And it can be difficult. It can be very difficult. And one of the things that you mentioned when you were younger, how they wanted to tokenize you pretty much. Like the famous Indian people, we want you to present on them. Like, that's all that we know, because our history only tells us a little bit about cultures that are not the predominant culture. So, whereas there's Black History Month, but what about?
And they always show Michael Jordan, Beyonce. It's like, that is not Black history. Like
monolith. Like,
basketball is not Black history.
Exactly. So just looking at all of those things that we deal with as a youth, it really carves out how we're going to have that internal perception of ourselves and how we should present when we get older. And like you said, it took you like 7 years until you realize, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be focusing. I was in my professional life. Well, I had a non-traditional education. So I went 3 years for undergraduate. I set out 3 years because I wasn't focused, went back, and I was in and out of various different jobs. But it was only after I was about 27, 28 that I realized this is what I'm supposed to be doing. It was so against the grain. People saw me going in one direction, and then they saw me shift. Just think about, I live in South Mississippi. So think about moving from Miami, Florida to South Mississippi. How backwards does that sound? But I saw something that I wanted to tackle, and coming back here, going through a specific process was going to allow me to tackle that and the population that I wanted to tackle it in. So with that being said, as far as you grasping, okay, this is the area that I want to operate in, what was that transition like? And kind of navigate us towards where you are today from when you first got started in that space.
Yeah. So when I first started teaching, I taught in the South Bronx and then in Harlem. And throughout that time, it was pre-K through 4th, both general education and special education. And I ended up being in an incredible school with an amazing principal who's like a school mom to me. She's my mentor, Danique Loving. She's everything to me. She took a chance on me and mentored me for 7 years while I was there, even when I was at a different school. She was in Harlem when I was in the Bronx, and then she brought me over to her school. And I remember the school that I was at had a set type of curriculum with math, science, all of the things. And she really, I think leadership is everything. And she was so instrumental in allowing me to be creative in the way that I instructed, but also the content of what I was teaching. And I think having that flexibility and knowing, saying, you know your students, you know your babies better than anyone else. We want you to be able to help them understand themselves was such a gift that I will never take for granted, because in that moment, I was able to collaborate with families, collaborate with students, even as young as 3 and 4 years old. What are your interests? What are your likes? What are you passionate about? Because kids as young as 3 years old know what they're interested in. And they see the world around them, and they are truly humanity in its purest form. So they have this fresh perspective of everything. But I think what was hard for me was that because we were part of a larger charter network in New York, it was often hard to really get into the nitty-gritty of what I wanted to do. So around social emotional learning, around, if it was project-based learning where we were learning about some type of specific subject, wanting it to be really geared toward what our kids' interests were. And I think that was the hard part for me, was that even with great leadership, oftentimes in school systems, there are so many walls, barriers, inaccurate information in curriculum, all of the things. But when you have such large school systems, whether they're charter, public, private, whatever, it's hard to always be fully authentic in who you are. And that was really hard for me. So I was teaching there. And then when I moved to the West Coast, moved to Seattle, was really starting to think deeply about if there was an opportunity to create a school space where it is truly thinking about decolonization of curriculum, really pulling in our families and having them be the instrumental piece of building curriculum, thinking about social emotional learning and how we're honoring the origins of that through Indigenous practices, through South African practices, you name it. What are we thinking? How could this be an experience that'll prepare our children for the world today? Because traditional school systems have not prepared our kids. Traditional school system did not prepare me. It was a lot of navigating and really great relationships with human beings after school. So having an opportunity to go into that space in Washington, where there's some really great work being done, allowed me to really zone in on what I was passionate about. And so I had the opportunity to help co-found the first elementary charter school in Washington. And my biggest thing was, no matter what, everything needs to be rooted in where our children are from, their locality. So our children were primarily from Ethiopia, Eritrea, Somalia, Mexico, and many other countries. But over 95% of our children spoke more than one language. And so we would be doing a disservice to our babies if we did not make sure that our families and communities were the first point of contact when it came to the community experience. Because that was also another triggering thing for me was, okay, I'm going to help build a school, but I don't want these babies to have the same experience that I had. And being a part of that being a part of that triggering experience, that was the thing that I did not want it to become. So I had an opportunity to collaborate with an amazing woman. Her name's Beatrice Coleman, who's now a CEO at, she's the first Black CEO of a school in the state of Washington. So, I mean, the fact that it's taken not up until last year is so problematic, but she is doing such incredible work with the middle and high school out there, actually. But had an opportunity to collaborate with her and had such just great conversation and fellowship with someone who felt just as passionate about this space. But then at the same time was experiencing a lot of tokenism as an adult, was experiencing a lot of oppressive experiences through the predominantly white leadership at that school. And so that right there was enough for me to say, I cannot continue to be in a space that I am giving 14 to 16 hours of my day every single day. I mean, we're all educators. We know that being an educator, it's not a 9 to 5. It doesn't go away. You're in it all day, every day. You're thinking about your kids on the weekends. It's just all encompassing. But I had to have a really sort of reflective experience and say, okay, yes, I'm so grateful to have built this. Yes, it's unfortunate that I have to walk away, even though I helped build this, but I refuse to allow leadership to tokenize me, to make me feel less than. And if you had asked me that 5 years prior, I probably would have not been able to walk away and said, I have to keep going. I have to keep going. But at some point, how can I tell my babies to advocate and speak up for themselves if I'm not going to do that for myself? And so that's what brought me out of that space and into consulting. And education consulting really was the catalyst for me to be completely unapologetic and authentic in my truth, personal, professional, everything, because for the first time, I wasn't confined to the walls of my classroom. I was meeting incredible people from all over the country who were just as passionate about diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism work, around social justice, education, and whether it was through Zoom or being able to move to different spaces, being able to travel, I felt so re-energized and not feeling alone in the process. And then from consulting, after having my little one, Rohini, and even just in the past few years, just thinking about how can I create an experience for my daughter, that's what just kept going in my mind so that she never has to experience what I did growing up. How can I make sure that I am righting all the wrongs of the past in some small way? And I know that it's hard to do that in education even now. People are putting out DEI statements like it's a Post-it and I've done my work, but are they actually doing the work? No. And or why is it just now? Where were you before? Is it performative? Is it because you actually believe in the truth of what you're writing? And so that's where this children's readery and learning center came about, because it's just been years and years of, if I'm not going to continue to try to knock on doors and try to break down walls that systemically were not created to
be broken.
Exactly. So instead, I'm going to create a space where our babies can feel seen, loved, valued, honored when they don't at school, when the school has banned certain books, when a school has decided that they're not going to teach the truth of history, when families who are advocating for their kids are not getting told the truth or getting the information that they need. This is going to be a space that is unapologetically out there. Come, let's learn together, let's advocate together, and let's work as a collective to either break down those walls or to start your own truth in education. So,
wow, that's amazing. It's so crazy that we call ourselves educators, but we're so narrow-minded and shallow, in our own thinking. Like, I remember I was telling Brian that I graduated with my doctorate in December 2019. And kind of a backstory of just a little bit. I was the student that when the teacher is saying, okay, we're going to all read a portion of the book, I was the one that had to go to the bathroom because I knew that I struggled with reading. And so I would like, can I go to the restroom? And I would stay there and hope that they skip me, and sometimes, I'm like, yes. So, I avoided that a lot of my life. And so, but I was always able, of course, I had to read, write a little side note, highlight, I learned that as I got older, of course, to say, hey, like, I can't just read this and I understand it. It's going to take me a little bit, but when you are growing up, you don't want to say, hey, I struggle with that. So me graduating to where I'm at now, my personal accomplishment is like, wow, I was the same girl that avoided reading, and I still avoid because I know what it takes for me to understand. Like, I type like I write papers like I talk, so I always had to have somebody say, hey, can you read over this? Can you look this over? Can you change this? And I'm okay with that. But it took me a long time to embrace that. So when someone would say something like, you're stupid or something, I would be like, it's like a trigger for me, right? So I remember when I graduated, and I've always been a coach. So people know me as being a coach. And, education has this thing where once they have you in a box, they want to keep you in that box. So in their eyes, you're a basketball coach, you're a track coach, you're a PE coach, stay in your lane, right? So when I graduated with my doctorate, I remember one of my coworkers, Caucasian, I got back and she's like, I turned in your name on the announcement so they could announce you and say, congratulations that you are now Dr. Hobson and blah, blah. And I was like, okay, she did that for 3 days, sending my name up there, and nobody ever announced it. Now we've announced someone's wedding. We've announced someone's birthday, never announced it. Right. And so in her head, it was like, well, maybe they're overlooking it. Well, maybe they didn't see it. And I was like, girl, no, they don't want to read it, And so it took one, and I know our culture is always, you don't want to have confrontation, right? So everything is pray about it, leave it alone, don't worry about it. And so that's what I was going to do. Just not worry about it. Just, forget it. I don't care. One of my coworkers during faculty meeting, they said, did we have any announcements, any celebrations? And people standing up, I got engaged, I'm having a baby, So my coworker stands up and she's like, she just, she is now Dr. Hobson. She's no longer Coach Hobson. And people were like, oh, okay. And that was it. And it was just, I had to literally write a long email to the entire staff and leadership saying, what does education really mean? We sit in these classrooms, we're talking about, being who you are and standing up for what you believe in and, embracing your gifts. And you have an educator here who is doing those things and you don't even celebrate it. So, when you talked about how you had to walk away from, what everybody was saying, probably telling you that you're so good at, and why are you leaving? Aren't you happy? You created this space. But at some point, you have to choose you or the money. And a lot of times for us, it's like, I can't quit. I got this, I got bills, I got student loans. Our parents didn't have money to, give us $10,000, $15,000. Thank God that I had a track scholarship in my undergrad. But if I didn't have that, we would have loans. So when you had to choose between your truth and your financial, like, okay, you still have all this medical loans that you got to pay for, and now you're walking away from a job. How was that with you? How did you, what kept you going to say, I don't care. Like, this is what I'm going to do. What was it? What moment did you have that made you feel like I just need to make this move?
I started having suicidal thoughts again. That was literally the moment. And it was in the middle of a school year, and I would never, ever, ever leave my classroom mid-year. Would never do that. But this experience was so traumatizing, and it was so hard. And I was one of 2 educators of color in the building. And there's that flow chart. I don't know if you've seen it. It's called the problem woman of color in the workforce. And you come in and it's the honeymoon phase, and then you're going through it. And then all of a sudden it's, what is she always complaining about? What is she always, and I was getting that from my leadership, And then at some point, and I ended up not leaving, until obviously the end of the school year, but I started having really deep, dark thoughts. And when it was even slightly mentioned, it was, why is she always complaining? Meanwhile, I had written the whole curriculum for the school, had been working overtime with, my team, my school team, had been, doing all of these things, because at the end of the day, I'm here for the babies. Usually the thing that makes adults leave a school is never the babies, it's the adults. And so I waited until the end of the school year. And then what happened was, I knew I was moving to Florida. I had an opportunity to be a consultant, because I was talking about going into consulting. And the person who had decided, who was having a conversation with me about it, did not know my background, did not know the things that I had done at the school. She had just gotten hired onto leadership because she was a friend of someone else on leadership. And they were going to pay me much less to come to Washington every other month and stay with someone, because they wouldn't pay for my stay there. They wouldn't pay for my flight there, all of these things, but thought that was okay. And in that moment, it was, I got to get out of here. No, you've literally used all of my work. You've stolen my intellectual prep. You've basically used as much as you can of me in certain spaces. And now you're just sort of deciding to tokenize me once again when you need me for less pay. And I think that was the moment where I decided to step away. I could have kept going, because it's scary going into a space where then you're like, I don't have health insurance. I don't have a consistent pay. Consulting, I have to now start all over in presenting my value to you. And I'm not teaching in front of a classroom. I can't give you a demo lesson. So I have to use my words to tell you my value as a consultant versus, being able to just show you, how much I love teaching. So that was the moment. It was just either life or death. That's the only way I can say it. And
the sad thing that people don't even know they're doing that, right?
Yeah.
It's like, when you talk about that, why, like, aren't you happy? Like, like everything is like, you have to be happy with this much. Like everything is, and if you say anything outside of that, is like, you're not a team player. You're not a this, you're not a that. It's very stressful. And I think that the stigma of Black women or women of color, even Black men or men of color, is the strong Black man, or the strong, so it's like any side of emotions or concern is looked at as like weakness. You should be able to handle more. You should be able to take more. You should be able, but it's like, maybe I can, but I shouldn't have to.
I shouldn't, exactly.
Exactly.
And why am I getting that when other teachers are getting mental health days, but I should be one to be able to handle it because
you're strong.
I'm strong and I can do this. And that's like another dynamic right there. But then yet we're going to talk about making sure that all of our babies are treated with respect and honored and valued. Well, you're not doing that to the adults, and the kids can see when you're not doing that.
Wow.
And just to your point about the reading piece, that right there makes me think about how we've even taught what reading is to our kids. The idea that if you memorize, if you read verbatim, that's a successful reader, where a successful reader is someone who just opens up a book or has decided to engage in a piece. And even then, I think about, and I get so passionate about literacy, because I think the way that we present reading to our littlest ones will define how they feel about it long term. And thinking about what success is. Being able to read something and memorize it and retain that information doesn't make you a successful reader. I had to learn that on my own, but also teach that to my kids. I'm the same way. I have to highlight, Post-it, all of those things. And I was taught that that's like, it's taking you too long. But there's such value in that. Because
they do now, if it takes you a long time, they stick a tag on you that follows you for the rest of your life. Now you are in special education, and those kids are sitting in there and knowing that nothing is really wrong with them. They just probably read a little bit slower, but that's the educational way is, I don't have time to teach you, so let me just stick this on you. And parents, it's presented to parents like he's just going to get extra help. But they don't realize that follows you for the rest of your life.
Exactly. And if you don't get the proper training for our educators around these things, then our babies are also labeled as early as 3 years old. I had 3-year-old babies who had IEPs on them, and I ended up moving up with them to kindergarten. And within the first month of just getting to know them, just was like, why is this happening? Why is this child have an IEP for speaking 2 languages? That should be honored and uplifted. Like, that's a beautiful thing, being multilingual. That's a whole nother thing. But I hear you, and I resonate so much with all of that.
And and when they put those labels on them, it does mess with their identity, because I have seen kids where I feel like there's nothing wrong with that student. He understands very well what and they stick him in that class. And I remember always seeing them waiting in the hallway. They'll walk past the class because they didn't want their friends to see them going into the classroom with the kids that had special needs. And they would act like they're going to go look for something. They would do everything they can to avoid going in there when it was like class passing time, because they knew they did not belong. And it would just be like, we do that so much, and they do it a lot with especially Black males. Because in order to keep them eligible for sports, they have to pass. No pass, no play. So they know once you put an IEP on them, or you put a 504 or some type of, special education, now they don't have to live up to the same eligibility standards as your average student. So now if he's not passing certain classes, it's easy to say, well, he has such and such, he has. And so now he gets those extra 5 or 10 points. So now he can play, but there's no modifications when you get on the field. There's no modifications when you get to college. There's no modifications when you're getting a job, So those skills that they're teaching them early does not help them for their life. So when you talked about, I remember seeing one of your videos, and you were saying in front of your class, and you were saying something like, basically you were like affirmations. I was saying that you did a lot of affirmations. You were telling the kids, you're not what they say you are. You're not going to be what they say you're going to be. And the kids was like, no, they were serious. They were like, we are not. And I was just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So it's just so amazing that you're doing that. So when you connect what you're doing, your literacy to your affirmations, like what is your drive behind, like what does that connection mean to you when you think about literacy and self-identity?
I think the very opportunity to see yourself in the pages of a book, and not through, obviously historical experiences are important, but the everyday experiences, to see books that have a little Black boy who's getting excited and nervous for the first day of kindergarten, like the everyday experiences. I'm thinking about, I'm looking at my daughter's, her little corner where all of her books are. And I'm just looking at even, the books about her Indian culture. And it's just talking about a little Indian girl getting ready to go to the market. Just those everyday experiences is what I feel really passionate about. I also just believe that so many of our schools have intentionally, and that's just my personal belief because of being in schools, but also growing up in that there are not enough books on the shelves, in the shelves, front and center of our babies, of color, unless it's a specific month that's being highlighted. Or you go to a library and there's a diversity section. I mean, it's problematic, and it's obviously it has a very significant impact on your identity or lack thereof when you don't see yourself everywhere. And so my big thing is about, how are we also bringing these books into spaces where we're reading it, we're exposing it, but we're also having really critical conversations. So my big thing is, great, you have these books, but what are the conversations that you're having with your students? Because if you're simply using it just to a check mark, like I have an Indian girl, I have a Black girl, I have an Asian girl, now I have my 3 books, like there we go. Or, there's my diversity piece, but you're not talking about how are we using diversity and inclusion as tools truly for social justice? How are we making sure that we're also training our teachers or educators or whoever it may be to make sure that when you're having these books, you're having really thoughtful conversations too. That's my bigger thing, that critical literacy piece, having windows and mirrors. The readery is really meant to serve as that space where our kids are really cultivating their curiosity, because I think curiosity has been suppressed, or, we can't talk about that. And why is that? Our babies deserve to have their curiosity honored. And what we do as the adults is provide language to have those conversations. Wow. So I think about my 4 and 5-year-old, one of them asking the other child, why is so-and-so wearing a patka, which in the Punjabi Indian culture, the young boys wear sort of a wrap and a patka to cover their hair. And, in my growing up, it would have been, that's rude. You don't ask those questions. Like, no. But then that's how we have problems of today, because people are not understanding or don't want to understand, or have created their own ideas, stereotypes, notions about of diversity. Whereas instead, using language to say, so instead of going and saying, why do you wear that? I was wondering, why are you wearing that? Or what is that called? And then finding an opportunity to resonate, oh, I actually wear something that has special meaning to me, creating these opportunities, because I think that there's also a trend right now of a lot of books coming out without an opportunity to talk about the meaning behind them. And that's where the real meat is, to allow kids to grow together, is to really be able to say, the purpose of this book is for so many reasons, but one of them is so that our kids can be activists of their learning and take what they've learned inside of a book and make any type of change in the world. So yeah. That's
It's so important what you're doing. You know, while I was just listening to you, there was a post that I saw on Instagram not too long ago. It said the definition of white privilege is when your history and your ancestors' history is a core curriculum, but my ancestors' history is an elective. Yes.
Ooh.
That by itself, that is.
You need to send that to me. I did not see that.
I know, and like when I saw it, oh my goodness, that's like, just say that. Like nothing else needs to be said, just that. And the thing is, you know, we hear so much from certain people in the Caucasian community, like taking offense to the usage of the term of white privilege. It's not a negative term. It's just an existence. You can use it for good, or you can use it for bad. So understanding that and being able to communicate that, I think, is so important, and being able to help our children. We don't have to necessarily use the terminology, but help our children from a young age understand that what you're being taught in this traditional setting that's not the full picture. So making them more curious about, okay, I only heard about this during February, like I want more of this. And then them be able to have more of it. Or, you know, Hispanic Heritage Month, October, like these. I live in South Mississippi. There's lots of Hispanics here, and it's like they only get taught about their culture during that part of the year. So why not incorporate more of our history into the core curriculum so that there is more representation? So, you know, just listening to watching what you do, listening to what you do, I'm just so thankful that you from the system and you're out there doing your thing now, because
thank you.
So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Why do you think that within education, especially now, they're more open to embrace the LGBTQ more than just talking about the things that are happening right now with the Blacks? And it's like, it's almost like that diversity is more acceptable than culture. You know, we've created extra bathrooms for these kids that are transitioning. We've done all these adapting, you know, for those students to make sure they feel comfortable, which is fine. Like, I have no problem. But nobody's ever mentioned or asked, how are the Black teachers doing with all this traumatic stuff? How are these Black kids doing? Like, nobody has created a space to say, y'all have a lot. Like, this is a safe place for you. This is where, you know, it's like we're almost. So why do you feel like we're more acceptable to accepting the LGBTQ than we are Black and brown, you know, community?
My first thought is that there's, when I think about the LGBTQIA plus, I'm still learning too, community, I think there's privilege in that space too. From what I know, and the reason I say that is because I think of, and this is, full honesty, I'm here to learn too, but when I think about a gay white male, I still think that there's so much more privilege, and people are more accepting, and the biases is still for the white community. Whereas when I think about the Black, brown, indigenous, Asian American population, I think of just as the very basic, like, skin color. and the fact that people are just outwardly or inherently racist towards something as direct as your skin color.
Because we're still saying don't talk about that, but we're openly talking about this. So it's
Right.
like
Like, no,
what's the difference?
No, I agree, because both are historically marginalized communities. I also think that there are people who are claim to also see, I don't even know how to explain this, feel more comfortable with talking about the LGBTQIA community. But when you say the word Black or brown, sometimes it's whispered, like with the Black community. And I've heard that before, and I've actually seen it before when it's talked about by someone who will claim to be anti-racist, or someone who claims to put the posts out about Black Lives Matter and things like that. But actually having the conversation requires you to get uncomfortable. It requires you, and whereas I don't see that level of discomfort with talking about the LGBTQIA community. It's very interesting. That's like such a good point too. Which is interesting because for me, I'm very passionate about talking about people of the global majority and people of color and, into my space. But when I'm talking about the LGBTQIA community, I'm still learning. But it's not that I don't feel uncomfortable. It's I want to learn. I want to figure, to be able to advocate more. But I don't find that to be the same. When people are saying, I'm here to advocate for the LGBTQIA community, it's not always in sync with the Black and brown community as well.
Because they've even given us training, I think last year or a year before, we had training on there's 90 different genders, there's this, there's that. And I was like, so it was surprising to hear they would implement that kind of stuff in school, but not anything, pertaining to, so it's just interesting. I was just wondering, and now that you're in that space where you can be more open and speak your truth, it's like, it's a lot different when you're in a space where it's like, stay away from those conversations.
And I think that curriculum too, I think from what I've read around the LGBTQ community, and I didn't learn a lot about it in high school, but for the most part, what I learned about it seemed accurate to what actually I know now. Whereas a lot of what I've learned about Black, brown, indigenous, the Latinx, Asian American community is all very inaccurate. So I think I wonder if there's also that element of people not being open to saying they were wrong or trying to right the wrongs when it comes to learning about how to decolonize a lot of the information that's been taught. So I think being able to say we were wrong or let's change it is a lot harder for adults.
And it would be so much you would have to change. I mean, we've been teaching the same thing for so long that can you imagine now saying, hey, everything you learned over the first, over the last 40 years is wrong. Nobody wasn't like we've already created this cycle, so it would be difficult to go back and say now, like you say, and then to be prideful to say, hey, we were wrong. Like it's just, I feel like it's just way too late for that. But like what Brian's saying, that's interesting that he talked about the elective piece, because if you want to learn about your history, and then when you take an elective, what are they saying about it? It doesn't even count against you. It doesn't help you. It doesn't count against you. Just taking it. So it's like,
you don't have to learn this stuff if you want to. It's not important.
It's an elective. You want to learn, you can get it in. If you feel like it's boring or whatever, you can get out of it. It's not a requirement to know. It's just crazy that I didn't even see that post. I'm just like, wow.
And even now, there are only certain states that are making it mandatory to learn African American history. Only like a couple.
And it's probably more East Coast.
Yeah. Yeah. I think maybe California, I'm not sure. But yeah, also just saying, wow, we've done something great. We're making it mandatory, where it's like, wait, why isn't this part of
history?
Yes, right. Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is just so amazing to see you in your space, and I can't imagine, you know, and I'm working on being in that space of where I can wake up and be in my truth, you know. It's I don't think people really understand when they see like, oh, you're a teacher, oh wow, you know. It's like, it's not a oh wow, you know. You know, it's not an oh wow, you know. Every time I talk to you know, him, and I'm talking to Streak, and he's just over there, you know, he'd be on his computer and he's, you know, hey, what's going on? I'm like, I'm fine, what are we doing? You know, because I like, you know, I'm just always, my mind is always like, I can't, you know, it's hard when you wake up and you know, I'm not in my truth, you know, and it's okay. Like, I love, you know, the kids, and I, you know, it's just that when you're not valued as a person, as an adult, imagine what the kids feel like.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I have a little more of a voice, but it's like, if you speak on it, you probably gonna be getting written up or having a conversation with a principal, or, you know, everybody's gonna be looking at you crazy, which is what I always get. But it's you know, I just imagine, if I feel like this, what do they feel like? You know, it's just crazy. So it's amazing that you're in that space and that you took that leap to say, because I believe, or even he says in the word, and I, you know, I'm faith driven, that your gifts will make room for you. It's like, when you operate in your gift, you know, when you operate in your gift, the money will come, the people will come, but no one can pay you for the amount of peace that you have. You know, people, especially in our community, it's always, people always want to attach a dollar sign to it. Well, you know, you could be doing, why you didn't go to medical school and be a medical doctor? Because I don't want to do that. You know, and so I think that a lot of times, you know, I always think about when the word talks about that, you know, your gifts will make room for you. And that's what they do. But it's that taking that initial step and that obedience to say, this is my truth, and I am choosing my truth over, you know, money or status or titles or whatever. So it's just amazing to be in that space. And what we have to learn times is that, you know, we have to also understand that it's our life, and we can press the reset button anytime that we want, you know. And I think the pressure, you know, the pressure of other people is what makes us feel like, I should be doing this, I should be doing, oh, by now I should be doing this, I should be doing that. Because I know I still feel that pressure myself personally. But, you know, for you, it gives people so much hope to know that, hey, you just got to take that one step. And it may not, you know, it may take a while. It may not, you know, present itself as the main prize from the beginning, but nobody can pay you enough for your peace. Nobody can pay you enough for your truth. And it's amazing to see you operate in that space. And it's unfortunate that we have to separate ourselves from the system in order to speak the truth. But if that's what we have to do, then that's what we have to do. And so I definitely appreciate you doing that and not letting them confine you to a certain, you know, box or a space that you should be in. Because people will tell you that you're so good at teaching, why are you leaving? It's like, I'm not worried about what I'm good at. You know, I'm worried about my truth. I'm good at a lot of things. That don't mean I wanted to be doing it. You know, so I appreciate you for that.
Thank you. That was amazing. Your gifts will make room for you. That was I have to keep thinking about that, especially going into this entrepreneur space and feeling imposter syndrome almost every day, thinking about, okay, what is my gift? What can I bring to the world? And how can I continue to do that when there are so many outside factors that are there to kind of tell you otherwise, especially like as a woman of color, a woman in business, a new business, like all of these different things. So that is something that I will definitely take with me as well. So thank you.
Yeah, and we'll stay in touch because that's one of the businesses that I help run is training entrepreneurs, like getting into that space and taking it to another level. So we have to, especially in the minority communities, we have to realize that most of the systems, regardless of how good we are, we're never going to be seen as equal. We're never going to be the same opportunity to make it to the pinnacle. I'm sure you've heard this. I may have mentioned it to you before, Sherelle, but in the Netflix series Scandal, where telling his daughter, you have to be twice as good as them to get half of what they get. We have to position ourselves, you know what? I'm just going to carve out my space and then build myself up to where I'm just looking over there. Not anymore, but it's a process. We have to be able to to do what it takes to get there.
I just think about you saying that just makes me think of why those affirmations for the littlest ones are so important. Because if we are teaching them from a young age that they matter, their gifts matter, that society will tell them.
And that they matter.
Yeah, they matter. That even through literacy, whatever it may be, or just standing in front of them, then they will also be more prepared earlier on to speak up and speak their truth when instead of sort of being not shocked, but not knowing how to navigate when the time comes to understand like society is it's not going to be equal. Like
it's unfortunate, and it's almost like you want to teach them their truth and have them really know who they are and speak on that. But the scary thing is, as a person of color, speaking your truth comes with consequences. Look how many people have died just speaking their truth, saying their rights. Hey, I have rights. I it's like you really don't,
right?
Because I remember, put your hand on the steering wheel. Now it's put your hand out the window. Now it's put your hands already up. We've done all these things and we get the same results. So the scary thing of teaching speak your truth to me is just are you willing to die for your truth? Because I'm not saying literally die, but it could just be, you're going to get pushback. You're going to get something. We don't live in a world where it's like, this is my truth, and they just accept it. I mean, it comes with a consequence, and that's scary.
I think about my third graders, as young as third graders, Black boys and girls, being seen or treated as adults when they are walking home from school.
That's
oh, sorry, is it working?
Yeah, you're good.
Oh, okay. And thinking about that idea of speaking your truth, but also the way that society sees even our youngest ones and treats them as adults when they're outside, just playing outside or sitting, at a playground or walking home from school and just hanging out. And so what does that also mean to protect yourself while speaking your truth?
Very true.
but also thinking about what does it mean to, I went to a conference, the Seattle's 50th anniversary of the Black Panther Party conference. And I remember standing up and asking activist, her name is Erica Huggins, and asked her, what do I do when I feel so defeated with teaching, but then not knowing who their next educator is going to be or what's going to happen, in years down the road. And that's where she said, that's where you have to just speak the truth of what is happening in society. So how do you marry teaching your youngest ones what the truth is of society, being open and honest, while also saying like you value and you matter? That's a hard thing. That's why I get that when people say teaching is like, oh, that'll be my last resort. I'm like, please don't. Then don't come into teaching, because we don't want.
We don't need anybody else checking a box.
Yeah, exactly. We don't need a last resort. We need this where you want to be. So
yeah. And when people always tell me, why are you trying to get out of education? Why are you, and it's like, because I believe that we have such an impact on the lives of these students that if you're not there for the right reasons, you're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not waking up every day and you want to be there and you want to be teaching and you're passionate about doing it and you're just checking a box, another year towards retirement, that's
Right.
not cool, because there's kids here that need that. And in our Black community, brown community, it's like we have this hope of with a better education becomes a better life, so a lot of them need it. But it's just unfortunate that, it never, and I used to always teach that to my girls, it's not easy, I went from being underqualified to now over, to being intimidated. People have told me to take doctor off of your resume because people are getting offended and threatened. And I mean, Brian knows I've been on interview after interview after interview after interview after interview after interview for these higher positions. And it's just like, you never have enough, Someone actually asked me, well, did you get a certification? And it's like, why would you ask me to get something else? Like, so it's just, it's difficult, when you're talking about, diversity and education, because you know that you need to be educated. And it may not be the traditional curriculum, but education is power. And in whatever form that's going to be in, but we have to continue to educate our mind, our brain. I tell my kids, the brain is your muscle. It's a muscle. So if you're not working it, you're not using it, then what are we doing? But we just truly appreciate the space that you're in and the work that you're doing. And your gifts will definitely make room for you. I truly believe that. So that's the last thing you need to worry about. I just continue to build, continue to push, continue to go, and allow yourself to be in whatever space that you're in, so that you can be the best at what you want to be. You don't have to, we don't owe it to anyone to be strong. We don't owe it to anyone to have it all right. We don't owe it to anybody to have it all figured out. So continue to do what you're doing, because we need people and women like you. So please continue to push, and we will continue to have a relationship and build with you. Anything that we have, going on, we would love to support you. And that's another thing. We want you to let everybody know where they can find you and how they can support you. You're like, you're looking for a certain job, you're looking for a certain whatever. If they need to book you for some consulting, we need to find you. We need to know where they need to do that at.
Yeah, so I am, you can find my work on my personal Instagram, so at Pranoo_K. And then also the children's social justice driven children's bookstore and learning center, Rohi's Readery. I also have an Instagram for that. So it's ROHISREADERY. So you can find updates and also really great books that you'll find also in the Readery soon, but also books that you can just learn more about. I also do virtual Shades of Brown read alouds that you can find on Instagram as well as YouTube. And the YouTube channel is called Rohi's Readery as well. And then I have a GoFundMe page for anyone who's interested in supporting the funding of educational programming for Rohi's Readery. So like I said, it's a learning center as well. So I'm doing a lot of virtual in-person story times of diverse books. I'm also doing phonics, summer reading support, doing partnerships with different nonprofits in the area as well. Also, Rohi's Readery is going to have a campus resource hub for families and adults, educators, you name it, who are just interested in learning more about the foundations of reading and also critical literacy for kids. And so I have a GoFundMe page that you can also just, I have it on my personal and my Rohi's Readery Instagram. So that is what I'm hoping
Tell
to.
us the GoFundMe again, so we can put it up.
Sure. So my GoFundMe is it's actually I don't know the link, but it says Fund My Inclusive Children's Bookstore. So I can send it to you if you'd like after this. But
yeah, send it to me.
Okay, I definitely
and
will.
We're going to make sure we post it out and put it on all the platforms we have, so people can donate to you and to the cause. Not to you, but to the cause, of course. Yes, to the cause. Put it out there. No problems. So
and literacy resources and all.
Yes. I truly believe that everything that you do is for the betterment of your students and for your kids, your kiddos. So I can guarantee that whatever you need will come forth.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for this opportunity and just this community. This has been amazing.
Definitely will. We thank you again. And one more time, where is it you're currently geographically located?
I am currently in the West Palm Beach area, West Palm Beach, Florida area.
Got it. Yeah, I used to have some clients, foster parents in West Palm Beach.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I frequent usually about 2 times a year. I'm down in the Miami area. So we'll definitely have to, potentially put together an event one of these days.
I would love that. And I'm looking to open the readery in the summer. So would love to have you also visit.
And I'm going to connect you with my god sister. She actually lives in Florida, and she has written so many curriculums and all that kind of stuff. But I get the same space from you guys. So y'all will be so good. So I'm going to connect you guys together. So that's what it's about. It's about building relationships and making those relevant connections. We never know what we might need each other for. And so we just appreciate you operating in your space. And so stay in that space because we need you. And we thank you for your vulnerability, your knowledge, your love, your energy.
Thank you.
You're the bomb, girl.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I just have to say my Thursday did not start off very well. And I can tell you that I am overjoyed right now. And I'm just so happy that this has been the way that my day is ending with both of you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to stick you backstage as we get ready to wrap up.
All right.
Yeah, it's been a thrill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, amazing. We had a diversity educator in here, and she is definitely operating her space. And so please make sure if you're in wherever you're at, hit her up, find out how you can bring her services to where you're at, because she is doing some amazing things. And our young Black and brown men, boys, girls need to have more educators like her, and even educating the parents on what they can do at home to help their child. So please make sure that you're reaching out to her and finding out how you can get more information and how you can bring her services to your place. I just enjoyed hearing her story, I mean, speaking on the things, it's crazy, Brian, because these are things that I think about all the time, even conversations we've had, that society make you think that what you're thinking is wrong. And so you question yourself. You're like, am I tripping? Or is it, so to hear someone say, I had to get out of that because of this cycle. So it gives you confirmation that the things that we're doing with HSBA, trying to bring those things into education it's going to be super important because our young men need it.
Yes, so true, so true. But guys, we always try to think of a different adjective to describe how awesome our guest was. This was just another great one, a different space than most of our recent guests. But I'm just so thrilled to continue to help push out what she's doing because she stepped out on faith. Say, you know what? I'm going to go and do me because when I do me, I'm going to bring so much more to the world than when I'm confined to this system. So off of that note, guys, we will be back next week, same place, same time. We'll be sending out some announcements on the guests here over the next 24 hours or so for the month of May. So guys, continue to share out the content. Make sure that you pay it forward because you never know who needs to hear the story that was just shared because it's going to allow them to realize, you know what, I can go another day. You know what, I actually can do this. You know what, I actually can go out and live my life instead of the life that society told me I'm supposed to live. So off that note, y'all, stay safe. Continue living your best life. And we'll see you next week.